attention. We're going to get started now. Great. I just want to start by thanking everybody for coming out on this warm, balmy day, or at least in here it is. So, again, thanks everybody for coming. We're very glad that you're joining us on this very exciting day. Just want to start out by explaining what Energize Rhode Island is and who our coalition is. So we are a broad group of businesses, environmental groups, and faith organizations who organized around the idea that we could put forth an economically feasible response to climate change. In light of the greenhouse gas emissions reductions targets set by, I'm going to say Energize Rhode Island, but I keep saying that instead of saying Resilient Rhode Island, we called for a bold response to set the state in the right path to meet those aggressive emissions reduction targets that were set forth in Resilient Rhode Island. With the introduction of the Energize Rhode Island Act today, this group is working to get an economically positive policy enacted this year. So to tell you more about the specifics of the legislation, let me now introduce you to State Representative from District 4 in Providence, Representative Aaron Regenberg.
Hello, thanks to everyone for coming out. My name is Aaron Regenberg, and I am very excited to be joined today by so many wonderful Rhode Islanders in supporting the Energize RI Clean Energy Investment and Carbon Pricing Act of 2016. I particularly want to acknowledge and thank some of my colleagues and co-sponsors who are able to be here today. Chairman Art Handy, who led the passage of Resilient RI and has been a top partner in crafting this legislation. Representative Lauren Carson, whose study commission on flooding has been doing excellent work in highlighting the real-life costs of climate change in our state. And my friends who've been working on these issues for many years, Representative David Bennett, Representative Michael Morin, Representative Shelby Maldonado, Representative Edie Agello, Representative Teresa Tanzi. Thanks so much for your support, and hopefully I'm not missing anyone. We are here today because we all agree on three important premises. First, we understand that climate change poses an extreme, perhaps even an existential threat to our world and our state. And therefore, it is critical that we respond to this crisis with urgency. Second, we know that in this response, there is actually incredible promise for Rhode Island, because building a clean energy economy of the future means more good-paying jobs, more money circulating in our local economy, and greater energy security for our state. And third, we agree with the countless economists, businesses, and political leaders like our very own Senator Whitehouse, who argue that carbon pricing is a very effective and efficient way of getting us where we need to go on climate action. Now, I don't want to spend too long on that first point because this issue is settled. I think that President Obama put it very well in this year's State of the Union address when he said, if you still want to dispute the science around climate change, go ahead, but you're going to be pretty lonely because you'll be up against our military, most of America's business leaders, the majority of the American people, and 200 nations around the globe who agree this is a problem and intend to solve it. I don't know about you, but I was pretty freaked out this Christmas when I was able to go for a jog outside in shorts and a t-shirt because it was 68 degrees in New England. 2015 was the hottest year in human history. And in fact, 16 of the last 18 years have been the hottest ever recorded. This is very real. And our response matters a lot. In fact, the effects of these changes are already being felt and experienced here in Rhode Island in more extreme weather events, in noticeable sea level rise, in more severe flooding, in local industries like lobster fishing that have been decimated by a warming Narragansett Bay. And while the threat before us is very scary, The good news is it's not all doom and gloom, because it turns out that the changes that we need to lower our emissions, strengthen our resiliency, and head off catastrophic warming are the same changes that can radically strengthen our economy now and in the future. It makes sense when you think about it. Right now, Rhode Island spends over $3 billion every year importing out-of-state fossil fuels. That's $3 billion that we send off to Pennsylvania and Texas and Saudi Arabia that we could be putting to work here in Rhode Island. Every megawatt that we can transition from out-of-state fossil fuels to in-state renewable generation and efficiency means more dollars being paid to Rhode Island workers, circulating in our Rhode Island businesses, and generating revenue for our state. That is the promise and the goal of the carbon pricing legislation that we are introducing today. The concept of this bill is pretty simple. The bill puts a fee on carbon pollution paid for by the companies that sell fossil fuels in Rhode Island. But it doesn't hold on to that revenue like usual. It turns around and injects it right back into the local economy in two different ways. First, the lion's share goes through a rebate program to every Rhode Island family and business, which accomplishes two things. One, it protects Rhode Islanders from pass-along costs from those fossil fuel companies. And two, it creates a concrete economic incentive for families, individuals, and businesses to invest in efficiency and renewables, because the cleaner and greener you are, the more of a benefit you get back in that rebate. The remaining share of the revenue goes directly into our efficiency and renewable programs to make sure that, in fact, they are accessible to all Rhode Islanders, from small businesses to low-income families, who now have even more of an incentive and a reason to take advantage of those opportunities. So it sounds pretty good in theory, and certainly we can look at the countries, states, and territories around the world that have implemented some form of carbon pricing and see that it's been highly successful in those places. But we wanted to see specifically, could a carbon pricing policy, a state-level policy, work here in Rhode Island, and what would the effects of it be? So the Energize RI Coalition had an economic analysis done by REMI, Regional Economic Models, and the results of that study painted a very clear picture that this policy is a win-win-win for our state. Not only does it significantly lower emissions, it also has a highly positive effect on our economy. Over 1,000 net jobs created in the first year, thousands more jobs in future years, and a substantial boost to our GSP, or our gross state product. As I said, win-win-win. Of course, I think we all understand that in some views this is going to be seen as a very ambitious legislative proposal. There will absolutely be certain big polluting interests who, by the way, right now are not paying for the negative externality of their pollution, who are not going to like this, right? And there perhaps are going to be certain individuals who hear the word fee and they'll immediately jump to opposition, perhaps before they actually understand what the program does. But the truth is, we need ambitious legislation because we do not have time to wait. And I mean that on multiple levels. Economically, this is where the world is headed already. China has announced a cap-and-trade system. Other countries are following suit. Rhode Island can either be a follower and get the least economic benefit from these trends, or we can be a leader for our country. We can be the people who develop and sell the energy of the future. But for that to work, we have to act early. Legally, as was already alluded, in 2014, we passed the Resilient RI Act, which legally obligated our state to meet certain emissions reduction goals. Right now, we are not on track to reach those targets. And we need ambitious legislation, ambitious change, if we're going to reach those legally mandated targets under Resilient RI. And finally, morally, we all have a responsibility to Rhode Island's young people, to my generation and the generations that come after mine. Today is actually my birthday, and so I think we should be very clear, and certainly the science is very clear. By failing to enact ambitious climate action, we are condemning the babies being born today at women and infants to a very dangerous future, to a life that is shaped by environmental catastrophe and all the effects that come along with it, from increased global terrorism to societal breakdown to more pandemics like this new climate-linked Zika virus that is already condemning thousands of infants in our world. We are standing at an incredibly important crossroads. Maybe it's the most important crossroads our species has ever faced. By introducing this legislation today, we want to start a conversation about which path we are going to choose. I hope to God that we make the right decision, because the stakes really could not be any higher. So thank you again so much for being here, and let's do this.
I'm on board. Let's do this. So next, we're going to hear from Ken Filarsky. He's the founder and principal of Filarsky Architecture, Planning, and Research, and he's also the president of the U.S. Green Building Council Rhode Island chapter. So, Ken, thank you.
Thank you, Bridget, and happy birthday, Aaron. Good afternoon, everyone. My name, as Bridget said, is Kenneth Filarsky, and I'm the founder and principal of a business that is very proud to be in Rhode Island. Filarsky Architecture and Planning and Research has been in operation since the very first day of 1976, and we've been honored with national, regional, and state awards for our work in architecture and planning. However, since those days of the National Bicentennial, my colleagues and I have lived through so much, and we've seen so much. However, we've never experienced the kind of changes that we are seeing right now and that we are experiencing right now. It's become very clear that we need to make decisions that prepare all of us in Rhode Island for the opportunities and challenges that are ahead. There is probably no greater challenge than we face than addressing climate change. Already in our state, we are feeling the debilitating effects of climate change. The extreme weather events of last August microbursts, the January 2015 blizzard, the spring 2010 floods, and Hurricane Sandy have crushed our businesses and our homes. Our rivers and bays are flooding more often with greater severity, leading to property damage and the burden of increased flood insurance premiums. The warming waters of Narragansett Bay and the Atlantic Ocean are crippling the fishing industry that has been one of the cores of our economy for generations. Climate change is costing us all money and time. It's making it all that much more difficult and harder to live, work, and conduct business in Rhode Island. Far too often, businesses and residents are left on their own to deal with the consequences. Far too many of them lack the resources to get back to where they were, let alone adapt to a changing environment. As the effects of climate change grow more severe, the cost to our homes and our economy will continue to rise. The Rhode Island Department of Labor estimates that as much of a quarter of our economy is directly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Think about that. Not acting is simply not an option, nor is it an answer. Major corporations such as General Mills know this. The United States Defense Department and our military branches know it. Pope Francis knows it. I think we all know it as well. That is why I support the Energize Rhode Island Act. I hope that others will as well. Climate change is the result of rampant carbon dioxide released into our air, our water, and our lands from the burning of the fossil fuels of oil, coal, and natural gas we use for our energy. To address climate change and the economic cost to us and to our businesses, we need to address the way we use fossil fuels and to build better energy solutions. Better energy solutions are better answers for our economy. The changes in the Energize Rhode Island Act are estimated to create over 1,000 new jobs in just the first 2 years of its operation, as well as drastically cut our carbon emissions. Most importantly, the increased incentives for businesses to use renewable energy and energy efficient incentives and initiatives in their properties would mean they would be able to lower their energy costs, mitigate future costs resulting from the results of climate change, while also growing our economy. This act allows us to invest in one of the strongest segments of our economy, the clean energy sector. This sector is already growing at a rate that is much stronger than the rest of the Rhode Island economy, supporting over 10,000 jobs and projected to add well over 1,600 more jobs by the end of the year. I think there's been recitation of that in other places in this August State Building, State House today. We can match our workforce, training to those new jobs, creating a synergy that will mean more growth. Additionally, of those clean energy companies, 87% of them employ less than 25 employees, meaning they are truly small businesses. These are businesses and companies created, made, and operated by Rhode Islanders. The Energize Rhode Island Act will accelerate that very sector. Passing this act would mean more funds to install solar panels, insulate homes, and implement other energy efficiency measures. It would mean more Rhode Islanders working in a field that has proven itself to be profitable and sustainable. Successful businesses plan ahead. I think we all know that. Properly allocating physical and economic resources so that they may achieve success and become leaders in the marketplace. With the Energize Rhode Island Act, Rhode Island will become a guiding beacon in the marketplace, signaling businesses to locate here because we understand the proper allocation of resources leads to our own prosperity. Energize Rhode Island will help existing businesses succeed as we free ourselves from this burden of sending $3 billion per year of our economic resources out of state to import the fossil fuels we use. We can't stop global climate change as a state. It's a problem that requires obviously a global solution. But we can ensure that we have the means to counteract the effect of climate change on our homes and our businesses. We can get ahead of the game. We can ensure that our energy bills are kept low even as temperatures rise. We can ensure that the cost of property damage is lessened rather than crushing businesses. We can build our economy while ensuring that it is sustainable and resilient. We can be that beacon that is the very soul and core of our heritage. I support Energize Rhode Island Act because we need to give our businesses and our economy better and smarter tools to address and mitigate climate change in Rhode Island. This act not only helps protect our investments, but actually grows our economy. We know our state motto is hope, but the truth is we cannot depend only on hope any longer. We need to act. We need to act now. Thank you very much.
And I also just want to recognize another of our top 5 sponsors on this legislation, Representative Carlos DeBone from Pawtucket. Thanks for being here as well. And also Abel Collins, who's the council president of South Kingstown.
Great. Thank you, Ken. And next, we are going to hear from Joseph Fernandez, who is the owner of Gentle Giant Flooring, another business owner in the state of Rhode Island.
Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Fernandez. I've been running a small family-owned business that has been operating in Providence for over a decade. Over the years, we've faced challenges not only remain in business, but profitable. We've had to redo entire jobs due to picky clients. We've had to deal with broken merchandise, supply shortages, and all kinds of things. We've always been proud of our ability to overcome these challenges and have our businesses grow stronger because of them. I'm here today because looking ahead, one of the biggest challenges facing us is climate change. Too often, climate change is discussed as if some far-off event happening in the future. The reality is it's already having an effect. We saw it in the damage caused by Hurricane Sandy in 2012 with microbursts in Cranston. We saw it with the flooding in my own neighborhood in Warwick, all over the state. Rhode Islanders are dealing with the damage caused by these events, and far too often businesses and residents are left alone to deal with the fallout. If you were to attempt to open a business today in Newport, Warwick, and many other parts of the state, you would find yourself facing a whole new set of barriers that did not exist for my parents. You would be faced with the burden of having to pay off costly flood insurance premiums that will only grow higher. Due to hotter summer and harsher winters, higher utility bills are also a given. Climate change means your business is always vulnerable to an extreme weather event that could permanently close you down. These are on top of the challenges that already exist, and they will only grow more dire year after year. These issues cut into both your profits and your ability to expand. Something must be done, and that's why I am proud to join over 100 small businesses across Rhode Island that have endorsed the Energize Rhode Island Act. The act would inject millions of dollars into our economy and give small businesses the tools to prevent these rising costs from crippling us. It would mean funds for businesses to weatherize. It would mean access to renewable sources of energy. And it would mean that every business would have the opportunity to protect themselves from the effects of climate change. We have to make these changes, and if we want them to be widespread, we have to make them easier to access. Pricing carbon is a fair way to fund these initiatives. Under this act, those who pollute more will pay more, and who better to pay for those improvements than the exact companies who are causing the climate change. I support the Energize Rhode Island Act because we need to give our businesses and our economy the tools to fight back against climate change. This act not only helps protect us, but actually grows our economy. When it comes time, I want the next generation of the Fernandes family to take over the business and not be so weighed down by the cost of climate change that failure isn't the only option. If we are serious about keeping small business in Rhode Island, if we are serious about giving the next generation a chance, we have to pass carbon pricing.
And next we are going to hear from Douglas Hall. Douglas is the Director of Economic and Fiscal Policy at the Economic Progress Institute. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Bridget. My name is Doug Hall, and I'm the Director of Economic and Fiscal Policy at the Economic Progress Institute. I'd like to thank Representative Regenberg and his legislative colleagues for their leadership on this and many other really important issues. And thanks, too, to the staff of Energize Rhode Island for bringing together this amazing event. There's little doubt that the issues this legislation addresses are among the most pressing that we face today, not just here in Rhode Island, but around the world. There is so much needs to be done and so little time to turn the tide. While issues of climate change pose huge threats to all of us, it's clear that lower-income families have been paying the highest price to date for an economy so heavily dependent on carbon-based energy sources. We see this from higher incidences of asthma for children in inner cities to the poisoning of groundwater resulting from surface mining or mountaintop removal in the mountains of Appalachia. This bill does a few things that we at the Economic Progress Institute think are really important. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities that we partner with frequently describes the main impact. Putting a price on carbon through market-based policies like cap and trade or a carbon tax is the most cost-effective way to reduce greenhouse gas pollution. By raising the price of fossil fuel energy products from home energy and gasoline to food and other goods and services with significant energy inputs, these policies would encourage energy conservation, investments in energy efficiency, and the use of clean energy sources. We share with our friends at CBPP a concern about what the impact of a carbon tax would be on low-income families. A portion of the carbon tax will in fact be passed on to consumers, including lower-income families, in the form of higher prices. Fortunately, the Energize Rhode Island Act addresses this concern by providing rebates to Rhode Island families and businesses, ensuring they come out ahead, especially if they do their part to reduce their own carbon footprints. We've seen the incidence analysis of this bill, and we are confident that lower-income Rhode Island families will be more than protected from any additional costs that are passed along. The fact that the Energize Rhode Island Act will help to catalyze innovative jobs in a critical employment sector is, of course, the final important piece of this puzzle. A cleaner environment, reduced carbon emissions, offsetting credits for lower-income earners, and a stronger, more innovative economy. This bill clearly represents a classic win-win for Rhode Island. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug. And our final speaker today is going to be Beth Millum. Beth is the chair of the Green Congregation Committee and of the Channing Memorial Church. Welcome, Beth.
Hi, I am Beth Millum. I'm a 40-year member of Channing Memorial Unitarian Universalist Church in Newport, where I serve as chair of the Green Congregation Committee, the first UUA certified green sanctuary in the state of Rhode Island. I'm also a longtime member of Rhode Island Interfaith Power and Light, former member of their board. I'm here today because I believe we have a moral responsibility to not only to care for this planet, but to ensure that we pass on a stronger and safer one to our children and grandchildren. I think we can all agree that right now we aren't fulfilling that responsibility, not as a state, not as a nation, not as a people. All over the world, religious leaders are speaking up about the need for us to act on climate change. The Pope himself has said that this is the defining issue of our time. You've heard from other speakers about how it has impacted our state, and the consequences of not making the transition to safer sources of energy should be clear. But it would be a mistake to see this as only an environmental issue. It's a societal issue. It's an economic issue. It's a moral issue. Climate change has affected all our lives already. Fishermen have lost their chance to earn a living. Families and businesses in Newport have been impacted by storm surges and flooding. These changes don't just affect the environment, they affect our health and well-being. They threaten our homes. They endanger the traditions and communities we've built our lives around. The true cost of climate change is not a dollar amount, but rather the toll it takes on us as a people and on all the species that we share this planet with, and whose loss diminishes us. I think of my grandchildren, and my heart breaks that they might not be able to grow up in the same beautiful state that their parents did. I want them to be able to walk along the coastline in Newport, to eat our delicious seafood. I want them to feel safe from natural disasters. But until we act, carbon emissions will continue to fuel climate change. Rising seas, warming oceans, and intensifying storms may threaten what we all love about our state. We have a responsibility to act, and that is why I support this bill. Placing a price on carbon would enable us not only to do our part to fight climate change, but also keep the money right here to help preserve our homes and families. It is a compassionate bill that not only stops the burden from this falling on the less fortunate, those who might not be able to afford renewable energy, or to adequately protect themselves and their homes. As a Unitarian Universalist, I espouse our denomination's 7 principles, and most especially the 7th, which states that we affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. To me, this statement puts forth the proper perspective for our actions. Existence is a web with everything connected to everything else. When we pull on a thread in one spot, something in a seemingly unrelated spot is likely to unravel. And we are part of this web, not at the top. We were meant to care for the planet as faithful stewards. It's not for us to plunder it for our sole benefit. When we do so, we are destroying our own existence as well. Ours is a beautiful world that reflects the beauty of creation. Let's all take responsibility for it and for one another. Let's ensure that the world we leave behind for our children and grandchildren and their environment is one that we'd be proud to live in. I want to end today with a quote from Pope Francis that I believe speaks to the teachings of all faiths and the work we must do. We need to regain the conviction that we need one another, that we have a shared responsibility for others and for the world, and that being good and decent are worth it. We need to strengthen the conviction that we are all one single human family. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for attending our event today. I can say,
I just want to also, again, acknowledge Deputy Majority Leader Deborah Giro has also joined us, and thanks again for her support as well.
So as the chair of the Energize Rhode Island Coalition, on behalf of my coalition partners, I want to thank all of our speakers today and the great leadership that we're seeing from the business community. And we especially thank the leadership that is standing up here with us today, our representatives that are going to take the good work that we've put together so far and bring it forward. And we thank you very, very much. I want to commit to you that the coalition remains extremely committed to this, and we are very excited to bring this out to Rhode Islanders. And if you have any questions, we'll be up here for any discussion that you might want to have. Thank you very, very much.